drama is only on social media today, then you haven't heard of Henry VIII, the king who turned all of England into the biggest stage in Europe. With 6 wives, a string of divorces and executions, and even dissolving the Catholic Church in England, Henry didn't just rewrite history, he made everyone wonder, how could someone be both a brilliant artist and a notorious tyrant? So who was Henry VIII really? A bold reformer or just a king really good at playing the big game? Let's pull back the curtain of history to discover it all. From his tragic love affairs to the decisions that changed an entire empire. Insert dramatic background music with images of Henry VIII's stern portrait, interspersed with images of his wives and key historical events. Brace yourselves because this story will leave you both amazed and laughing at the bold moves of the most dramatic king in English history. Welcome to Faces of History. Here we uncover fascinating stories from the past and dive into the lives of legendary figures who shaped the course of world history. If you're passionate about history and the incredible journeys of those who made it, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Let's embark on this inspiring journey through time together. The life and character of Henry VIII. Henry VIII was no ordinary king. He was the type of person you could picture sitting on the throne, holding a scepter in one hand and signing divorce decrees with the other, all in a single morning. Born in 1491, Henry wasn't destined to become king. The throne originally belonged to his older brother Arthur. But when Arthur passed away unexpectedly, Henry reluctantly became the heir, and from that moment, his story began. As a young man, Henry was truly the prince of every dream. Handsome, tall, athletic, and especially musically talented. He even composed songs. Some historians say that, had he lived in today's age, he would have probably been a social media star with millions of followers thanks to his charm and diverse talents. But don't let his polished exterior fool you. At his core, Henry craved power and control more than anything else. When he ascended to the throne in 1509 at the age of 18, Henry was initially loved by his people. But as the saying goes, power can corrupt, and Henry VIII is the perfect example. Over time, he gradually transformed into a man who was unpredictable, intelligent, decisive, yet hot-tempered and sometimes shockingly ruthless. A man of contradictions, Henry could be sweet and charming, but he was also capable of being incredibly authoritarian. He loved being the center of attention, to the point where you might imagine he was the first to invent the concept of spotlight. Sometimes he hosted extravagant parties just to flaunt his wealth, yet he was equally ready to take action against anyone who dared oppose him, even if they were his wife or closest advisor. Ambitions beyond the throne. Henry didn't just want to be remembered as a king, he wanted to become a legend. He was once deeply involved in international politics and warfare, but the results were not always favorable. While he wished to be seen as a brilliant strategist, many remember him as a king who squandered the royal treasury on feudal wars. So, who was Henry really? Simply put, Henry VIII was a complex mix, both a political genius and a man obsessed with power and fame. He could be wise in one moment, but full of rage and emotion in the next. To some, he was a symbol of innovation and progress. But to others, he was a king full of talent, but riddled with flaws. 6 wives and controversial relationships. Henry VIII was not only famous for his reign over England, but also for his tumultuous and dramatic career in marriage. Known for having 6 wives, Henry sparked curiosity in many. How could a king who was both wealthy and powerful have such a troubled love life? Let's take a look at each of his controversial love stories, where politics and emotions intertwined like a long-running soap opera. 1. Catherine of Aragon, the unsuccessful political marriage. Catherine was Henry's first wife, originally married to his brother Arthur. After Arthur's death, Henry decided to marry her to maintain an alliance with Spain. The first few years went smoothly, but trouble began when Catherine only bore one child, Mary, and no male heirs. Obsessed with having a male successor, Henry quickly concluded that the marriage was invalid because Catherine had once been his brother's wife, and so he divorced Catherine, but not through a typical annulment. He broke ties with the Catholic Church and created the Church of England. just to be free to marry again. 2. Anne Boleyn, from passionate love to the executioner's block. Anne Boleyn was the reason Henry dared to defy the Pope. Initially, she refused to be Henry's mistress, forcing him to marry her. Anne quickly became queen, but just as quickly lost Henry's favor after she only gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, who would later become the great Queen Elizabeth I. When she failed to give him a male heir, Henry began to suspect Anne. Ultimately, she was charged with adultery and treason, accusations that had no convincing evidence, and ended her life at the executioner's block. 3. Jane Seymour, the perfect wife, but life was too short. Soon after Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour, whom he considered the true love of his life. Jane finally gave birth to a son, Edward VI, but tragically died just days after the birth. Henry mourned her deeply and never spoke ill of her. At the end of his life, he was buried next to Jane, the only one he considered his true queen. 4. Anne of Cleves, a marriage based on a portrait. Henry married Anne of Cleves based on a portrait. However, upon meeting her in person, he declared that she wasn't as beautiful as the painting and quickly annulled the marriage. Anne, being quite astute, accepted the divorce without protest and lived out the rest of her life in luxury as the king's sister. 5. Catherine Howard, a tragic young love. Catherine Howard, a young and beautiful girl, was married to Henry when he was already old and overweight. Initially, she captivated Henry like a young man in love, but the marriage quickly turned disastrous when Catherine was accused of adultery. The result? Another execution. It seems Henry had an unhealthy preference for how his marriages ended. 6. Catherine Parr, the final survivor. Catherine Parr, the last wife, was also the only one who survived after marrying Henry. She is remembered as intelligent and diplomatic, successfully maintaining harmony with a king who was exhausted and in poor health. Looking back, Henry's marriages were not only about romance, but also political moves and power. For Henry, wives were not just partners, but tools to achieve his goals. A male heir, international alliances, or even just fleeting pleasure. Henry VII's religious reformation. If you think creating a new religion is something deeply spiritual and noble, welcome to the story of Henry VIII, the man who founded the Church of England, not for any sacred reasons, but because he wanted a divorce. Yes, you heard that right. This famous religious reformation actually stemmed from his personal love life and his desire for power. Why the Reformation? It all started with Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife. After many years of marriage, Catherine couldn't bear him a son, something Henry considered the greatest sin. He decided he needed a new wife, and his target was Anne Boleyn, who refused to be his mistress unless they were properly married. But there was a problem. The Pope in Rome refused to grant the divorce. Why? Catherine was the aunt of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, one of the most powerful figures in Europe at the time. Going against Catherine meant going against Charles V as well, and the Pope didn't want that trouble. With his ego bigger than the throne itself, Henry decided, if the Pope won't allow it, I'll make myself my own Pope, establishing the Church of England, a bold yet convenient decision. In 1534, Henry passed the Act of Supremacy, declaring that the King of England was the supreme head of the Church of England. This meant he gave himself the authority to make all religious decisions within his kingdom, including the right to divorce. From then on, Henry severed ties with the Catholic Church and founded the Church of England. The main reason? To legitimize his marriage to Anne Boleyn, and of course, not for any sacred reasons, but for personal gain. Unexpected consequences. Henry's religious reformation didn't just change the religious system, it also led to a series of unforeseen consequences. Seizing church assets. Henry closed monasteries across England, seizing Catholic Church property and land to enrich the royal treasury. This was one of his most successful business ventures. Centuries of religious conflict. Breaking with Rome led to conflict between Catholics loyal to the Pope and those supporting the Church of England. Religious riots and disputes persisted for decades afterward. Creating a new religious system, the Church of England was designed to suit Henry, not bound by Rome, but also not as radically reformed as other movements in Europe. In a way, the Church of England was a custom-made version to serve the king's needs. Reformation, or just a way to get a divorce? Although Henry VIII is often praised as the leader of the religious Reformation in England, his true motives were a combination of personal ambition, love or lust, and the desire for a male heir. Henry didn't pursue religious reform because he wanted to change the spirit of humanity, but because he wanted to change his own life. Politics and War of Henry VIII. If there's one thing Henry VIII wanted to prove to the world, it was, I'm not just a drama king in matters of the heart, but also a skilled political and military strategist. Of course, this depends on your perspective. Was he truly brilliant, or was he simply burning money on wars and policies that led nowhere? Let's take a look. Politics, the king of complex alliances. Henry VIII wasn't just interested in his own throne. He also wanted to be a major player on the European political stage. The problem was, he lived in an era where powers like France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire were all vying for dominance. The result? Henry dove into complicated alliances, often switching sides as frequently as he changed. Wives. Alliance with Spain. Initially, he allied with Spain through his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. But after the divorce, he turned against Spain and became hostile. Confrontation with France. Henry couldn't resist waging war with France simply because that's what English kings did. Although he won a few battles, he never truly captured any significant territory. Relationship with the Holy Roman Empire. This relationship also fluctuated, depending on what benefits Henry could gain at the time. In short, Henry VIII wasn't a steadfast diplomat. He was more like the friend in the group chat who keeps switching sides based on who's offering the best deal. War, burning money and reputation. Henry VIII loved war, not because he was a born strategist, but because it made him feel important. However, his wars often led to more financial consequences than tangible achievements. Campaigns in France. Henry continuously launched attacks on France, but the results were often disappointing. Although he briefly captured Calais and Tournai, these territories didn't bring long-term benefits. The French even mocked Henry as a king who enjoyed fighting for fun. War with Scotland. While attempting to subdue Scotland, Henry caused many bloody conflicts. His victory at the Battle of Flodden Field in 1513 was a bright spot, but the England-Scotland relationship remained tense and unsustainable. War costs. These wars drained England's treasury. To compensate, Henry had to raise taxes and seize property from the church, actions that didn't sit well with his subjects. Henry VIII, reformer or destructive leader. To his supporters, Henry was a decisive king unafraid to confront major powers. But to his critics, he was merely an impulsive leader who didn't consider the consequences. Either way, it's undeniable that Henry VIII made England an important player on the European political map, though sometimes this came more from impulsive decisions than strategic planning. The aging and decline of Henry VIII. In his youth, Henry VIII was the epitome of charm and strength, but in his later years, he became a perfect example of the saying, "No one can defeat time." The king who was once famous for lavish feasts, grand battles, and dramatic love affairs gradually transformed into a grumpy old man, plagued by illnesses and becoming more tyrannical than ever. From an ideal king to a shadow of himself. Imagine, Henry VIII was once a tall, handsome, athletic man with musical talents. But as he entered middle age, everything began to change. He gained weight uncontrollably, and by the end of his life, his weight was estimated to be around 180 kilos. Yes, you heard that right. Henry VIII became one of the heaviest kings in English history. It wasn't just the weight gain. He also faced many painful health issues. Leg ulcers. His leg ulcers grew worse over time, causing intense pain and making it difficult for him to walk normally. He had to sit in a special litter to move, which only added to his increasing irritability. Gout. His diet, rich in meat and wine, led to him suffering from gout, a disease known as the king's disease. But perhaps even a king couldn't escape this painful affliction. An increasingly irritable personality. The decline in his health not only affected his body, but also made Henry's personality more unpredictable. He became irritable, authoritarian, and frequently suspicious of those around him. Part of this was due to his insecurity about his health and power, but another part was because he had lost patience with the world. Henry didn't hesitate to be ruthless with anyone who displeased him, whether they were close confidants or even family members. One of his most famous victims was Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, who was executed when Henry suspected her of infidelity. Unwavering ambition, despite physical decline. Even though his health continued to deteriorate, Henry never gave up on his ambition for power. He continued to govern the country, participate in wars, and engage in political schemes, despite having to do it all from his chair. However, his decisions were often no longer as sharp as before, leading the kingdom into even more difficulties. Henry VIII passed away in 1547 at the age of 55. His death is believed to have been due to heart failure, possibly related to obesity and long-standing health issues. Although he no longer directly influenced events, the legacy he left behind continued to shape England for many centuries. The Church of England. The religion he founded remains the primary faith in England. His children, Henry's children, Mary VIII, Elizabeth I, and Edward VI, each left their own mark on history, the image of a dramatic king. Henry VIII is not only a historical figure, but has also become an endless source of inspiration for literature, films, and satirical stories. Henry VIII may have deteriorated in health and spirit in his later years, but he never lost his enormous ego and decisiveness. Whether you think of him as a great leader or just a king with many talents but many flaws, it is undeniable that his life was a colorful story, from the heights of glory to the final days of painful decline. Perhaps the greatest lesson from Henry VIII is, time may take away your health and appearance, but your ego stays, especially if you are a king. Henry VIII may have left this world in 1547, but his presence continues to live on in history, culture, and endless discussions about whether he was a great king or just a monarch addicted to drama. Henry's legacy lies not only in the policies he left behind, but also in the turbulent story of his life, making him one of the most unforgettable figures in English history. 1. The Religious Reformation, the Church of England, and the grudge with the Pope. One of Henry VIII's most significant legacies is the creation of the Church of England. By breaking away from the Catholic Church, Henry not only opened a new chapter in England's religious history, but also laid the foundation for a more modern society, where the king was no longer controlled by Rome. However, it's undeniable that his initial motivation was simply, "I want a divorce." Nevertheless, this religious reformation created a system that the Church of England still exists and thrives today. Perhaps Henry never predicted that his decision based on personal reasons would lead to such a profound change. 2. The royal family, a controversial line of succession. Henry VIII left behind 3 children, Mary I, Elizabeth I, and Edward VI. Each of them made their own mark on history. Edward VI, Henry's only son, who reigned for a short time before his early death. Mary I, Bloody Mary, famous for her attempts to restore Catholicism in England by executing numerous Protestants. Elizabeth I, regarded as one of the greatest monarchs in English history, leading the nation into a golden age. Looking back, Henry's legacy lies not so much in himself, but in the children who succeeded him and fulfilled his dream of power. 3. Architecture and art. I want everyone to know who I am. Henry VIII wasn't just a leader, he was also someone who loved to showcase his grandeur through architecture and art. He built many lavish palaces, such as Hampton Court Palace, Windsor Castle, and Whitehall Palace. All of these carried a clear message: I am the center of the universe. In addition, he was famous for portraits that exuded authority, such as the famous painting by Hans Holbein, where he stands with his legs apart as if to say, I am great in every sense. 4. Politics and military, debt and wars. Henry left behind a more independent England in terms of religion and politics, but he also left a bankrupt treasury. Unnecessary wars with France and Scotland plunged the country into debt. However, he also laid the foundation for a stronger military, with a significantly improved Royal Navy, a crucial factor in the centuries that followed. 5. Image in popular culture. Henry VIII was not only a historical figure, but also a cultural icon. He appears in countless novels, films, and television shows. From the image of a powerful king in artistic works to the drama king version in modern plays, Henry continues to be an endless source of inspiration for history enthusiasts. Perhaps Henry VIII's greatest legacy is the question he leaves behind. How could a man who was so intelligent and ambitious be so driven by emotions and ego? Henry teaches us that power is a double-edged sword. It can shape history, but it can also destroy the one who holds it. And so, we've journeyed through a tale full of drama, from turbulent marriages to decisions that changed the course of history with Henry VIII. He was a man full of ambition, contradictions, and no shortage of intrigue. A king willing to burn everything, from diplomatic relations to the national treasury, just to get what he wanted. But no matter whether you see Henry VIII as a political genius or simply a selfish king, it's undeniable that he left an indelible mark on English history. His legacies, whether good or bad, remain an important part of the foundation of modern England. In the end, remember that the story of Henry VIII is not just a lesson about power and ambition, but a reminder that no matter how many wives you have, how many palaces you build, or how you change the religion of a nation, time and history will always be the final judges. What do you think of Henry VIII? A great king, or just a king full of talents, but many flaws? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next exciting videos. Thank you for watching, and see you again in more fascinating historical stories.